Hi, I'm Sudhir Palluri, and this is the Tech Deep Dive podcast, where I have a nuanced, long-form conversation with experts and academics in the automotive field to help the rest of us understand the deep technical details of the emerging technologies without the jargon. In today's episode, Les Williams is here with me. Les is the Chief Risk Manager at Risk Cooperative, where he helps clients develop risk mitigation strategies and help craft solutions for emerging risks in the cyber and political arena. In his past life, Les got a mechanical engineering degree from University of Virginia, an MBA from Harvard, and worked at Ford. You can hear Les on the BBC World Service Business Matters. But today, I put my automotive hat on and talk to him about risks in the fast-changing and emerging world of mobility. Risks in autonomous vehicles, e-bikes, and what each one of us can do about cybersecurity. Have a listen.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's so good to be here. And my clapping is the background music that we have when a guest is usually introduced. Yeah.
All right.
Good to see you, man.
Good to see you. I am excited to have you on. And so let me start with risks in general. So anybody can talk about risks. People talk about risks all the time. Some people say autonomous vehicles are safer, way safer than human drivers. And some other people say autonomous vehicles are so much more dangerous on the road. But you put numbers on this risk.
Yeah, we actually tried to, and that's the funny thing. What's interesting is this, I like to start, whenever I speak to groups of folks, I always like to talk about risk from a very high level standpoint, something that everybody can relate to, then I'll drill down with everybody deeper.
Yeah.
So when you were younger, you were taught risk is bad, right? You say, don't go out with friends late at night when you're under 18 because it's risky.
Yeah.
Why? It's because you don't know a lot about yourself and you're still a growing person. And of course, the older all of us get, the more we end up sounding like our parents when we're telling our younger children or younger nieces and nephews, don't go out at night late with groups of people, especially if you don't know, because it's risky.
The word risk basically means bad things can happen to you.
Exactly. Where I like to look at it as in our line of work at Risk Cooperative is, if you could put a fixed price on uncertainty, would you feel comfortable doing any type of thing that you want to do to either grow yourself or even grow your business or grow yourself personally or professionally? So risk is not always a bad thing if we understand what our risk tolerances are. Here's a very recent example. You know, Buffalo Bills recently played a football game and they were at the 1 yard line. It was 4th and 1, and they were gonna, kick a field goal, then they'd tie it, probably go into overtime. But they said, you know what? Our quarterback, Josh Allen, he's been in this situation 14 times. 13 of those times he did convert the first down. We're comfortable taking the risk that he may get it. Unfortunately, he didn't. He got stopped. But that's an example of risk reward. And some people came down on him hard when really they looked at the numbers, they looked at the metrics, and they said, we're comfortable taking this risk. But Sudhi, when we talk about risks, I like to say, being, both of us are engineers, if you can measure it, you can prove it. And so when we're looking at different types of risks, we look at things like where an industry is, what type of industry a company is involved with, because some industries are riskier than others. Healthcare, for example.
Right.
The reason, if you're ever looking at cybersecurity insurance for healthcare companies, it's going to be higher because of the protected health information, or PHI.
Right.
That data is so valuable to criminals, right? You're going to pay a higher premium for that, right? Because that's how it's rated. We also look at a company's revenue, right? If you're a big company, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, cyber thieves most likely will target you and ask for a higher ransom. So that involves some rating. Of course, past claims is another important thing, right? No difference in us getting our auto insurance. If we have a spotty record, then we're going to pay a higher premium. And so what's interesting about this electric vehicle, autonomous vehicle industry that we're in is we don't have a lot of data on things just yet. And that's what's so scary about it. We are building this up slowly as all the different experiments are going on in different cities across the United States.
Right.
But my view on this risk that we're facing now with autonomous vehicles is 20 years ago, when cyber insurance was just starting, because it has been around 20 years, most people think it's just been 5 years.
That
They
was
didn't
my
have,
thought process.
yeah, 20 years it's been around. But they didn't, back in 2001, they didn't have a lot of past performance and records
Right.
that they could model off of. So prices were kind of all up and down. They were kind of everywhere. Now it's since leveled out. We have a better idea. We have ways to monitor that risk better. We have firms that specialize in underwriting certain cyber risks, for example.
Yeah.
Carriers even have their own methods of doing that. So I think that that's where the autonomous vehicle is industry right now.
Got it. So when most people think of risk, they say we should reduce the risk, or how could we reduce the risk? But you're saying there is inherent risk in everything. How bad is this risk, or
That's
how
exactly right.
likelihood is this risk?
That's exactly right. We can avoid it, and if we avoid the risk, guess what? You and I are never getting an automobile again. We're just going to walk everywhere, or we're just going to Zoom. Where instead of going to the grocery store, we're just going to walk if it's 5 miles away. Right? We can't do that, right?
You're right.
But how can we reduce the risk of getting injured, for example, in an auto accident, right? So it's all about risk reduction, not necessarily avoidance. And here's what's really interesting. So I do work with several universities, and we've designed an event cancellation product. And you'll find this quite interesting because it'll relate to a lot of things that we're going to talk about on this podcast today. Several universities I've worked with said, Les, we are at war in a friendly sense with our other competitive peer institutions.
Right.
We want them to come to us and not go somewhere else. So how can we mix up our offerings of educational experiences? And so some of the things that we've suggested to universities is, hey, we noticed that, for example, you do not have a global travel program, or if you do have one, it's very limited in scope. That's why you're not getting the students that you want. So what we've done for several universities is we've designed an event cancellation product. So as students, faculty, and staff are traveling overseas, God forbid something happens, whether it's threat of a natural disaster, threat of communicable disease, all different types of maladies and ailments that are out there, internal civil war, strife, airline cancellations, we're able to design a solution where they can pivot from one country to the next at a moment's notice and get refunded on airfare, hotel costs, all those types of things. And so these universities have said, oh my gosh, we are now more competitive because we put a fixed price on uncertainty in the form of a premium payment. Risk Cooperative, my company, we help them get a premium payment and said, if something happens, and if you're going to Cambodia or Kenya or anywhere in Asia or in India, you can pivot knowing that you have this insurance product to protect you financially. So that's one example of some of these schools would never consider doing these things because the risks were too great, but we were able to reduce them and put a fixed price on it.
Cool. Let me bring the conversation back to autonomous vehicles because I have a couple more questions on it.
Yeah.
When you're looking for numbers, are you looking at number of accidents per miles driven? Is that this kind of a metric you're looking for, or what?
Yeah. So here's the answer. We don't know yet.
Right.
And the reason why I say we don't know yet is because the early research on this stuff actually says that autonomous, and I have this written down here. I'm gonna look at my notes. I took some notes for this because I was so excited to come speak with you. It says, let me look down here. I believe it's like 9 on average. This is it. On average, there are 9.1 self-driving car accidents per million miles driven, while the same rate is 4.1 crashes per million for regular vehicle crashes. So that's from the National Law Review when I was doing that research. So you're thinking, okay, right, there's a higher number of accidents per mile driven, right, than regular vehicles. But the issue is with these autonomous vehicles, the crashes seem to be a lot greater. Like when we look on television, you see all these fires, and somebody was asleep at the wheel and they crashed into a car and it burned up and went crazy. So self-driving cars currently have a higher rate of accidents than human-driven cars, but the injuries
they're more spectacular, or maybe they're getting a lot more coverage because it's new. I'm sure there's spectacular accidents.
You got it.
Too.
You got it. So here's what's interesting. So, but what we see though is the spectacular, fireballs in the air with people that are dying in these self-driving vehicles. There actually are more self-driving, there's more self-driving car accidents, but they're minor fender benders. A car bumps into a wall and the fender falls off, for example.
Got it.
But for human-driven cars, the accidents are a lot more spectacular because we have drunk driving and all types of stuff that goes on.
Yeah.
At the top of the podcast, I was saying near the beginning, when you're under 18, don't hang out with the wrong crowd because bad things can happen.
Right.
So, but our perception is they're horrible because of what's shown in the news about these horrific accidents. So, and that was from the National Law Review, and I thought that was a fascinating article when they wrote that. So, that's cool. Beginning back to your saying, like, how do we rate this stuff?
Yeah.
The reason why I say it's still early and new is because we still don't have a ton of data yet. Where I live in Arlington County, Virginia, they're nearby Fairfax County and part of Arlington. They are doing some autonomous driving tests that happened earlier this year. So you're going to see a lot more of that happening, and the more that happens, the more data that's gathered. I think the more insurance carriers will feel comfortable saying, well, since we have all this data, all this test data, we now can start looking at when and how accidents happen and occur. We're not there yet, I don't think, but we are getting there.
Yeah. So yeah, we have autonomous shuttles running here in Ann Arbor too.
Yeah.
So when those startup companies, for example, say we are going to work on autonomous food delivery, and they're looking to get insurance, are they getting written for the worst case scenario and the highest premium possible? Or are you actually looking at this data and going, the chances of you making a damage is quite minor, and therefore your risk premium is probably similar to another software company?
No, I think it's higher. And the reason being is because it's just still so new.
Unknown.
It's so unknown. And that's what happened with the cyber insurance industry 20 years ago. It was a lot higher because we just didn't know.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is it did go down, the cyber industry premiums, but then they've gone back up because of all of the cyber attacks that are happening. And so it does tend to trend with what currently is happening in the news. Mm-hmm. But those like the self-driving shuttles and all the things you're saying, they're higher insurance premiums because it's so new. But here's something else to think about. And this is the strange, scary word in insurance and risk management that we call vicarious liability. Whose fault is it?
Right.
So let me give you a quick anecdote, and then we'll bring it back to autonomous vehicles. So I wrote an article published in Risk and Insurance, a periodical, and it was like it said big data is actually the new microscope for healthcare companies. So what's happening is certain hospital systems are working with companies like Google and Microsoft and saying, we're going to give you access to our patient data. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, we're going to totally scrub the list and separate social security numbers, personal information, date of birth, all that's going to be scrubbed.
Right.
But we're going to use that data, Google or Microsoft's going to use that data to try to establish trends and use artificial intelligence to say, okay, if we've tried these certain treatments for this particular malady, what are the outcomes? Mm-hmm. So net, it's good because what we want to do is make sure that patients don't have to spend as long in a hospital, right? Mm-hmm. That's going to A, save the sanity of the patient, but also B, save the hospital time, money, and resources. And especially in the world of COVID, you want as many beds free as possible. And so the problem with that is, let's say, I'm using a very far-fetched example, which actually, unfortunately, is going to come to fruition soon. Let's say that a doctor gives a diagnosis based on something that the Google or Microsoft algorithm spits out, and Mary should take this type of treatment. Well, let's say Mary gets sicker, worst case dies, but let's say she gets a lot sicker.
Yeah.
Well, who does she sue? The hospital? Or does she sue Google or Microsoft because they're the ones who made the recommendation?
But what kind of insight can the doctor get from metadata?
Yeah, so here's what's interesting. In this case, the doctor, and this is funny enough, this is what the article talked about, doctors and people in general should not rely solely on AI. Yeah. What they should do is say, just like as engineers, we're trained, when we get a spit out from a computer or a machine, when we read it, we have to use our own instincts and our own experience to say, will this work or will this not work, this treatment? Yeah. So we use AI as guide rails in the final decision-making process. So you're right, from the metadata, they shouldn't ignore it, but they should also look at it based on their past experience and also consultation with other study and clinical trials that have taken place.
Yeah.
And it goes Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Sudhi.
No. That just reminded me of this other startup company that is in the same space as me, and they use AI to read your heart rate measurement (EKG),
EKG. Yep.
and they realize that by monitoring the trends of the EKG over a long period of time, they can figure out that perhaps the patient has an internal bleeding, something that the doctors wouldn't catch for another 3 or 4 days, but it'll tell you a few days before.
Awesome.
So that I think is a really cool application, and something I can get behind.
That's 100%. Yes. I mean, I'm a Luddite. I had a BlackBerry Bold. I kept it for 10 years. I finally got a Google Pixel. I love it. And just last week, Sudhi, I got a Fitbit.
Yeah.
And so I use it to monitor my sleep schedule. And it's telling me things about my REM sleep, my light sleep, my deep sleep that I could never have imagined in my wildest dreams. So your competitor, I mean, the fact that they have this, it's so helpful. And here's the interesting thing. And I'm going to make a comparison between the Fitbit and this other competitor. The Fitbit is pretty accurate. It'll give you a broad picture of what's going on, for example, when you sleep.
Yeah.
It's never going to be perfect as if you were to go to a hospital and they hook you up on the special sleep machines that they monitor for folks with sleep apnea.
Yeah.
But if we can just get an insight, a general picture of how we're doing health-wise, then it will cause us to say, you know what, I'm not getting enough REM sleep. I now need to go get help. I need to see a sleep specialist. So like this device you were saying, it triggers, oh my gosh, we didn't even see this. You need to see a specialist. So just having that recommendation is so powerful. And that's how I think AI should be used and will be used going forward, is aiding us and not being the end all be all of this is the final diagnosis and treatment. Yeah. That got me excited. That's all. I love hearing stuff like that.
So tell me this. We talked about how the data is helping us and can help us, but what about the privacy of the data? Or maybe I'll ask a straight up question. The car companies, let's say OnStar, they're tracking where you're going. Your watch is tracking. My thermostat is tracking if I'm home, not home. Who should own the data?
Yeah. Should
you own the data, or should these companies own the data?
Yeah. So that's a hot button question, because right now and recently, as of when this podcast is being published, just yesterday I read a story about a woman who found files on her Amazon Alexa, all these files of her recording and her talking and things that she said. And so you're right. This gets in the big issue of data privacy, and this is why every good company or person needs a really good lawyer. The example I just gave in the healthcare industry, and there's laws that say if data is being used for the furtherment of betterment of science and health, then you don't have to disclose to the patient how you're using it. Of course, you can't have his or her records linked to it, but that data can be used if it's being used. It doesn't violate HIPAA if it's being used as part of treatment. Yeah. Here's the problem with healthcare, for example. All of a sudden, with Fitbit, right? Well, what if all of a sudden Google's going to use some of the things that it finds on my Fitbit and then tries to sell me products? That loophole also exists in the autonomous vehicle space, where you're going to know how fast you're going, right? My whole thing is that, in my opinion, is just like when you plug in Progressive Snapshot, you get a discount on your auto insurance when you plug it in.
Yeah.
You have to give them permission to use that. And so I think what will happen is there will be a tug of war between, okay, autonomous vehicles, self-driving vehicles, whatever, or even the electric vehicles when they come through, all the technology we have.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a war between consumers and also the companies regarding, this is my data, I don't want you to know anything. But the companies are going to say, well, this is going to be used for safety reasons.
Yeah.
And so once you start, so the same parallel I gave of certain things in the health industry don't need to be disclosed if they're being used for the furtherment of health and it doesn't violate HIPAA. I think that automakers will be using the same type of argument to say, we're just trying to make these vehicles safer. And so, yes, you have a Tesla. Yes, you can flip it into self-driving mode, or even when you're driving, we're going to monitor that because we want to know how how you're behaving and how the car's behaving so we can make safer vehicles. So I think a middle ground will come, and that middle ground will be in the form of the federal government. That everybody says, oh, big government, right? We always say we hate big government. But if a hurricane comes or a tornado comes, right, who's the first person governors call? The big government. I need a check, regardless of who's in office, Obama, Trump, Bush 1, Bush 2, Clinton.
That's right.
All govern, we all, at some point, that's why we have a government to help us in those types of situations. So I think, Sudhi, the government will step in and do a job of regulating the data privacy. It's already happened right now with Facebook, right? So you're going to see a lot more of that.
And already happening in Europe. So they have GDPR.
GDPR, that's right.
But I don't know the answer to this question. They have GDPR where you can't track and collect a lot of data. But what about the cars? What's going on in cars in Europe? Are they still able to collect data on you?
Yeah, so that part I'm actually not sure. I don't know, but what I do know is that based on how strict GDPR is, and by the way, my crystal ball, Sudhi, is that GDPR-like policy is going to take place in the United States on a federal level. It's already started in states like California, which is very progressive, in New York. We'll get to that in a little bit. But if by the letter of the law, if you're doing business in the EU, you have to stick by GDPR restrictions, then these auto companies are going to need to stick by that as well. I don't see, based on what I've been reading about GDPR and some of the fines that have been levied, they're pretty severe.
Yeah.
I don't think auto companies are going to be exempt from that. Again, I'll go back to the government though. If we're starting to see that crashes are taking place too much and auto companies are trying to do a better job of fixing it, I do think the government, the EU and the different governing bodies will step in and say, okay, we have to have what's called an insurance lingo, a carve back, where within some type of policy, you carve out or carve back certain things. I think that may come into play for the benefit of society and the safety of society.
I don't understand the carve back. Is it the data? Could you explain?
Oh yeah. So right now, like how strict GDPR is,
right?
If let's just fast forward 10 years, so there's self-driving cars, or 20 years, 15 years, however long the time is, when you have enough self-driving cars on the road, and let's say that a Tesla has both, the self-driving feature and also the driver can take over. But let's say there's still a lot of crashes in that. So what I think is going to happen with all this technology, especially with Europe shifting over to several companies in the EU shifting over to away from gas-powered vehicles into electric-powered vehicles, if there's a big preponderance of crashes and safety issues, I think GDPR will say, okay, our car companies, we have a very strict policy in place about data privacy, but we're going to carve out or carve back some of our language specifically related to your industry, such that you can collect certain amounts of data.
Exceptions.
Exactly, exceptions. Thank you. So carve back is another way of saying exceptions to the rule. I believe that may happen.
Yeah, and I think that would make a lot of sense, and I might voluntarily choose to share data on certain things.
Yes.
Either on my health or even on my style of driving, as long as I know who is asking for it and what they would be using.
That's right. That's right. And no different than, if you remember, it's about a year and a half ago, all of a sudden when we're on these websites, Sudhi, you start seeing the thing, it says, please accept these cookies. And if you reject cookies on certain websites, then you actually can't go on the website, right? So all of that was in the name of data privacy. So I do believe when we start our electric vehicles up one day, and the first thing it comes on is, you're going to give us a software update. It's going to say this data is being used by, I'm making this up, the European Commission, like their version of NHTSA, right? National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Some of this data is being used for the benefit of safety of all societies. Please accept. And if you don't accept, guess what? You can't drive the car. It's going to be vapor lock, right? You can't start it up. So it's as far-fetched as that sounds. We've done a lot of things in this world different countries have in the name of safety. One of them is vaccine mandates. So I do see something like that happening in the name of safety.
Over the air updates for cars, the software scares me. And it scares me because I come from a world of software and I do not know a software that doesn't have bugs, no matter what the software is. Now, if you look at the aerospace industry and you hear that the latest big fiasco with Boeing was all related to software, and you go, should there be an over-the-air update? What are your thoughts?
So first of all, it scares me too. I'm okay with over-the-air updates on some of my apps on my smartphones.
Yeah,
right now,
critical.
I'm not comfortable with over-the-air updates either. In 2021, there's about 10 billion IoT devices. That number is expected to grow to about 25 billion by 2030, just because we live in such a connected world. And in insurance, there's a term that the listeners here may know of from a Merriam-Webster definition, but you never knew it was applied to insurance. It's called exposures. The more exposure that you have, that's a greater attack surface for a bad guy to get in and breach you from a cyber perspective. And that's why in my early example, I start off with when we're rating risk, one of the things we look at is revenue. If you have a big revenue base, you have more exposure, right? You have more people. There's hundreds of thousands of people that work at your company versus 10. If all those people that work at your company, chances are they're more susceptible to leaving their laptop open at a Starbucks, and a bad guy can look in and get in and try to get into your systems, right?
Oh, I see.
God forbid, something like that.
I didn't realize that having big revenue was because of the number of people that work for you. I always thought that having a lot of revenue meant that you're a rich entity and you can pay a lot more.
No. By the way, no. So that too. So you can use exposures in both senses. So for example, exposure means if you have $250 million in revenue, that means you have a greater exposure because bad guys want to steal your money because you have more of it. So you're exposed from that perspective. You're right. But also what typically happens, and they're actually one and the same, but there is close correlation. Companies with a lot of exposure, from a people standpoint, like hundreds of thousands of people, usually if you're a company that big like IBM, you also have billions of dollars in revenue. So it does go hand in hand.
Right.
But even if you're a company with 15 people, I'm exaggerating here, but let's say you have $1 billion in revenue, say you're an amazing software company, you still have a large exposure base in the form of revenue, but typically 15 people, $1 billion. So yes, I'm glad I brought So that's when we talk about exposure, right? But from the standpoint of IoT devices, when we're gonna have so billions and billions of IoT devices as the world goes on, because it's easy, it's convenient, right? Bluetooth speakers, baby monitors, dam control systems, right? Bad guys have successfully breached into some dam control systems. Thank God they weren't able to, move any of the levees and flooding small towns, but they will try some of that stuff in the future. Our grid system, national grid from different countries, they've been breached before by other nation states. So I worry that bad guys will get into these over-the-air updates, and you're right. Actually, forget even the bad guys, bugs. That's a clear example. We call that in insurance a system failure, right? Where it's somebody, a computer program, a human making a mistake and something happens, right? And there's a system failure in that part. And then of course, the other failure is the critical failures that we hear about with bad guys breaching. I'm not comfortable yet with over-the-air updates. What I think may happen in the short term, Sudhi, as we see the proliferation of more of these electric vehicles, is when you go to a mechanic to get a tune-up, I believe they will, and you'll know this from our parlance in the auto industry, the NGS, the next generation sensor, when they pull it in to read all the diagnostics, kind of like Snapshot from Progressive. I think that these stations will be the one to give these updates. And what I mean by that is if it's not a critical update, hey, by the way, the next 1,000 miles or so, or between the next whatever number of charges, stop on by to get the latest software upgrade.
Right.
I feel more comfortable with that. Because then you can then work individually on these service stations and say, let's make you rock hard secure versus just on air, over the air updates. It scares me.
Absolutely.
scares me.
Me too. And I would prefer to have the same thing where I go to the dealership and they hook it up and they do the update. And I should have the option to just not update it at all.
Yeah.
Actually, for my phone, when there's a new update on the operating system, a lot of times I'm like, no, thank you.
Yeah,
Phone's
I'll
working
wait.
just fine.
I'll wait.
However, they twist my arm in the back because all the apps then update themselves to the new operating system, and suddenly this thing is no longer working like it should
And your hands are tied.
I'm tied. Yes, absolutely.
God, that's so frustrating. And but the good thing is I'd rather have that happen on our phone, like we said, versus our car.
Yeah,
Because
that's
that's
right.
something totally different. And it also brings up the fact of, you know, everybody's saying, well, heck, why don't in the future we want it because we have such a pilot shortage now.
Mhm.
Why do we even have pilots? We know we have autonomous drones
Right.
that fly for the U.S. military. Why don't we just have Delta Airlines and Southwest? That scares me because again, you don't have human interaction in there. And if
Yeah.
a bad guy can get into a system and the sophisticated ones can, you know what could happen. So these,
Are you and I standing on the wrong side of history and only scared because of lack of data? Maybe in 10 years or maybe in 5 years when we're talking and the data is there, we go, you know what? That would I'm more comfortable with that now.
I think we are actually on the right side of history because as the data, by the way, the data will get there where we can do all this stuff in a pretty safe fashion. Like we could have autonomous pilots flying hundreds of thousands of people a day to their destinations globally.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm worried about. But at the same time that skill and expertise grows, the skill and expertise of the bad guys is going to grow with it.
Yeah.
That's what scares me because we've already seen it happen. So I think we're realists because we have, like we started off in the beginning of the call, we have information, we have a track record, we have history, right? That's what insurance, we live on that stuff, the precedents, the numbers, the claims history.
Yeah.
You and I have seen the claims history of what's been going on, and they're getting more sophisticated. So my thing is, we're on the right side of history because we will have some systems that are automated, but those systems I think won't be the critical ones like planes, passenger planes specifically, for example. Military planes, they do that. They have super duper complex systems, right? Getting back to the word exposure, their exposure based is more controlled because they have a certain number of planes that they know that do this, and they're highly controlled. But when you start talking about major airlines and the number of people, there are a lot more passenger planes out there than military planes. That's when that exposure base grows. And, you know, American, Delta, Southwest, yes, they have amazing, robust cybersecurity, but not like the United States government and military, right? And even that at times has been breached. Every day, hundreds of thousands of people try to breach the Pentagon, right? And thank God successfully they're denied pretty much every day, even on weekends. Hackers take no break.
Right.
But you start talking about civilian targets, they can be a lot softer. So I would argue we're on the right side of history.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it. But I ask myself the question all the time: am I that old man who is
get off my lawn?
Yeah. Oh, that, you know, I'm always asking myself the question whether I'm that old man that doesn't like technology, or am I being cautious because I have seen enough crazy things happen.
Yeah.
The future of mobility for our world plans on having autonomous vehicles, e-bikes, scooters. Which one of those, from a risk perspective, sounds risky to you? Little Lime bike. I hate to name brands, but you know, just bikes. Scooters or e-bikes, which now is all the rage in the cities, because what e-bikes do is that they make distances shorter, as one of my other guests said. You know, you could have done 3 miles on a regular bike. With the e-bike, you can now bike 5-6 miles, and roads become flatter. If you have a hill, you use a boost, and it's easy for you to go. So e-bikes are, from a sustainability perspective, are great.
Mhm.
But what about from a risk perspective?
Yeah. So this is I talked. So I'm also an adjunct professor at the UVA School of Engineering, and I teach a class called the Business of Engineering, and we do different case studies.
Yeah.
And one of the case studies that we did, funny enough, it was actually on Toyota, and it was on the Toyota production system, and we compared that with other car companies as well. And we talked about the future of transportation during this case, and we're
Yeah.
doing it again in the spring semester. And what's interesting is I think of, because we've talked a lot about internal combustion engines, and the biggest risk for them are of course electric vehicles.
Mhm.
And then we didn't talk about the biggest risk of electric vehicles. And I think a big risk that nobody's talking about is the way cities are designed to make it easier for e-bikes, e-scooters, e-skateboards,
Yeah.
one wheels, the people that on the bike helmets that go around with the little remote control and fly by you at like 25 miles. They go fast, 25, 30 miles an hour. That's a big risk from a city design standpoint in Washington, D.C. and Arlington County as well, where I live in Arlington.
Mhm.
There's so many more bike-friendly lanes, which I love seeing. But the problem is that bikes, and I'm a big biker. I bike all the time along the uh, uh, Silver Crescent Trail from Crystal City, Virginia to Bethesda and back most mornings early. I get up pretty early, like 4:30, stretch, all that. I want to get on the trail early before all the e-bikes come out,
Mhm.
because I'm telling you, they have crossed the line where, yes, there's commuters that are commuting to work, but they're going so fast, and I'm like flying. I think I'm going fast at 23 miles an hour sometimes, and somebody flies by me with a coffee in one hand and a donut in the other hand, going faster than me. I'm like, oh my
Oof.
God, this is crazy. So my thing is, do you belong on the street? Are you a moped?
Right.
Are
I
you a
think they
moped
are.
or are you a bike? I do as well. And so what's also scary about that is, as these vehicles are these mobility vehicles are becoming faster, you don't see a lot of people wearing safety equipment,
Right.
right? And that's what scares me too, is that of all folks, you need a safety equipment because of the speed you're going. At least when I see the guys on the skateboard, men and women on the skateboard, the electric skateboard, you see those, and also the one
Yeah.
wheels.
Yeah.
A lot of them do have, like, dirt bike helmets on and knee
Right.
pads. That does make me feel good. But the casual person that's jumping on one of the scooters, whether it's Lime Bike like you mentioned, right, or Bird, they don't. They jump on. Sometimes they have the purse in one hand, again, the coffee on the other hand, and they're going like this. We have had some fatalities in DC because of that. This was pre-pandemic when a lot more cars were on the road.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, the biggest fear I see is that the same regulations that we put towards cars, we're it's a little bit more lax when it comes to like e-bikes and scooters. I know in DC we have Capital Bike Share, and New York you have City Bikes.
Yeah.
You have Hubway in Boston. Now you have e-bikes. Those, not only do you have the bikes that you pedal, but you have the e-assist bikes, but you don't have to wear a helmet with those. And so what it means is you can go on extended trips, and let's say you have a few drinks at the pub, jump on your e-bike to go home, and you get in an accident and you don't have a helmet on.
Yeah.
That's the biggest risk I worry about, is we're not implementing helmets. And also, I think that there should be a governor so the bikes can't go above a certain miles an hour. It's all cities and states have their own different speed limits that they put up, but physically on the machine, there should be some type of, I'll bring up that nasty R word, regulation, where these e-bikes are regulated.
Yeah. I would agree with that. That having a speed limit governor would be good.
Yeah.
Who pays for this risk for e-bikes? Is it the e-bike maker, or you think personal insurance people would have to foot the bill?
Yeah. So I think for that, it's you're gonna hate this, and people think that I'm some type of crazy big government person, but I think it goes into the bucket of federal tax. The
Mhm.
reason why I don't say state tax is because on something as important as this, you need uniformity.
Mhm.
If Virginia said, you know what, we want to make sure that we implement these safeguards, so we're going to do a tax. But guess what? Where my place is, I'm a mile from the DC line, and then maybe 4 miles from the Maryland line. People e-bike all through there. So you're telling me that you're going to have different restrictions in Maryland and Virginia than you do in DC, right? It's just there needs to be some level of uniformity, no different than how everybody has to wear a seatbelt, right? It's not like, hey, in Virginia, you don't have to wear a seatbelt. Maryland, you do, right? This is so important. I think uniformity needs to come in the form of a tax, that evil T word. But when I mean tax, and here's what where people don't necessarily need to jump and say, oh my God, my taxes are going up. I mean something small, 2 cents, right? When you multiply that across all the millions of people that live in the country, it's not a lot of stuff for something that's so important. And let me give you a quick example by that.
Yeah.
California has something called Assembly Bill 1054, and it's to prevent their insurance from wildfires, that insurance fund from just being depleted. So here's how it works. With all the crazy fires that have been going on in California, a lot of them have been started by equipment of publicly owned utilities, like our good friends PG&E, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where down power, you didn't trim the trees, all of a sudden one of the tree branches touch a transformer and it lights up. That's how several of them have started, which is scary. Right. So what Assembly Bill 1054 says, look, there's been so much, pressure on the insurance to cover all these liabilities. We're going to establish a fund where if you do certain things like tree trimming programs, replace aging infrastructure, right, and just make sure that the chance of a fire starting is less and less, you can then contribute into a fund. This Assembly Bill 1054 has this fund where you can contribute into. So of that fund, already businesses and homes in the state of California, they pay about $1.50, and that covers certain like utility bill things that go on.
Interesting.
Some of that money, that tax, $1.50 per household or business, some of that is being contributed for this fund as well. And so what happens is, if a public utility, unfortunately, their equipment starts a fire and it goes up, and we start having to pay all these homeowners and property damage and other legal liabilities that come out of that, they can pull from this pool that they have that is contributed by the private citizens and private businesses from California, in addition to money that they already put into. So it alleviates a lot of pressure off the insurance industry. So all that being said is, yes, you could talk about how do you contribute towards this. You can look at, raising homeowners insurance premiums. Fine, you can do that, or auto insurance premiums, but also even small taxes as small as a cent or 2 cents, right? Just because it's not the same. The fallout from accidents are nowhere near the liabilities that have happened from these massive wildfires. And that's where I did my rough back of the envelope calculations on that cent or 2 cent.
Yeah, makes sense. And I can see the government using taxes to create a climate change fund, the investments from climate change coming into something like this, because I do believe that e-bikes are good.
I do.
For transportation in general.
I do. I really do.
They really reduce the amount of energy required to move Les Williams from his home to his office. The amount of actual kilowatt hour, the energy.
Yes, that's right. They really do. And the thing is, as we see a preponderance of even more e-bikes on the road, my thing is, from a safety perspective, officers of the law, it's a lot easier to regulate automobiles on a road than it is a bike path, somebody speeding. You can't do that. But maybe what we can do is have, especially downtown DC, where it's easier to monitor traffic flow of these e-bikes because they have the designated bike lanes. Again, I'm looking into the forward now. You'll laugh now, but if it happens down the road, we'll be looked at as the geniuses, right? Because we're already made fun of because we're the people that people think we're behind the 8 ball because we're very worried. We are very worried about over-the-air updates. But I can imagine e-bike cops monitoring speed, monitoring traffic. I really see that could be the future as the growth of e-bikes continues.
Now, for that, you no longer need people to add that. Sensors within bike lanes can easily track your speed and make sure if you're speeding, a speeding ticket arrives in the mail automatically.
That's the future. As crazy as that sounds, you can that I never thought I'd walk into downtown DC and see whole parking spaces erased. And all of a sudden people are eating at these fancy restaurants outdoor, like it's a patio.
Look great,
right? It looked great. It looks great because of COVID-19. And now some more lanes of traffic are completely gone. You have bike lanes.
Right.
5 years ago, whoever would have thought. So that's why your idea of what you said, these speed monitors, that's around the corner.
Yeah,
especially in cities.
Already happening in London. If you drive at nighttime at London, you run a red light. There's a picture of your driver's license, and your penalty arrives in the mail.
Yep, that's right.
Proof.
That's with proof. And in DC, they have several of those. One of them is in Georgetown on M Street, right by Georgetown or K Street. There's an infamous tunnel connecting Georgetown and downtown DC. And if you're not from the area, you're just going along at a nice clip, but you don't know it goes from like 35 miles an hour to 25. So everybody stops and slows, and you see people who aren't from there, they will get a ticket. It's happened to me when it first implemented 8 years ago. So yeah, it's funny. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So we've got to talk about
We have to.
that.
Yes.
What portion of your mind share in risk is cybersecurity?
So do you mean mine or businesses and individuals?
I'd love to hear both.
Okay.
How much are you, Risk Cooperative, working on my cybersecurity?
Yeah. So our mind share of this is 110%.
Wow.
We do all types of, so Risk Cooperative, we're a full service insurance brokerage firm and risk management firm. We do employee benefits like medical, dental, vision, life, health, short-term disability, long-term disability for companies. And we also do property and casualty insurance. And that's things like workers' comp, general liability, professional liability, and unique risks like I talked about, event cancellation. But we also do cyber liability insurance.
Yeah.
Right now, cyber liability insurance is 110% of our mind share, and cybersecurity is also 110% of our mind share. I mean, I both my Google Pixels here, I VPN when I'm working somewhere remote, for example.
Yeah.
When I'm in airports, I never ever use the USB to charge my phone, the USB cords, because people have put transponders in there where they can take information from you or download data. I always use the plug, where I plug in a plug and then I put my cord in there. Yeah. So I'm always aware, even when, and I've got my wife to do the
same. We are so similar. I do not ever plug in my USB in there.
I never, but and here's something interesting. And my wife laughed at me first, but now she gets it because of the proliferation of deep fakes. Mm-hmm. Whenever a phone number calls me and I don't recognize it, but it may be somebody I'm expecting, I'll actually pick up the phone and I'll change my voice. I'll say, "This is Jeff," or "This is Mark." I'll change my voice and use an incorrect name, because what sometimes folks do is, bad guys, they'll record your name and they'll use that to then AI to then make sentences from your voice.
You want to go on? You want to hear what I do?
Yeah.
I pick up the phone and I just put it against my ear and don't say a word. I'm like, you are not getting any audio.
I love that.
So I just answer and I'm quiet. And if it's a real person, there's a little uncomfortable, hello? Hello? And I'm like, yeah, hi. Okay, you're a real person.
I like that. I like that. Mind if I steal that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to steal that too. Because I'm comfortable with silence because of what I do for a living, and you are too. That's what I'm going to do. Isn't that fun? So I'm 110% cyberware. Now, I've gotten clients to also up their cyber game. I'm very patient when I talk to clients about cybersecurity. And the reason being is because usually we work with a lot of government contractors, given we're in the DC area. All right, Les, hey, I need this insurance because this is what the contract says from the federal government or the state government or whatever, if I'm working with a big government defense contractor. And I'll say, okay, yeah, I know it says that you just need errors and omissions insurance, which covers third-party liabilities, right, but you should also add cyber in there. Oh, no, it doesn't say we need it. Okay, but what happens is right now, there's a famous statistic, 60% of small businesses go out of business within 6 months after a cyber attack.
Oh,
So I can get you some good cyber insurance for your company. What, it'll cost you for what you're looking at, and this is a recent example, you'll pay about $3,500 annually for $1 million limits of insurance. I can do that for you. And no, I don't. Then a month later,
mhm.
the same contract says, well, look, now it says we need cyber insurance.
Yeah,
And then I do get it for them, but guess what? The price has gone up because that's just the way cyber is going.
yeah.
And so I always tell people, cyber insurance, it does not mean you will not get breached, but it puts a fixed price on uncertainty. And I know we don't have a lot of time on this webinar, but when you hear the word cyber insurance, it's not just protecting you from extortion,
Yeah.
but it pays for things like forensics investigators. You have a law firm that's on retainer to help you. You have a PR firm, because God, and it talks about GDPR. GDPR also requires that you disclose when you have had a breach. So PR firms help companies say, we've been breached, but here's what we're doing to maintain and control things from getting worse for our clients and also for our business partners. And so I've gotten them to think more so about cybersecurity from the perspective of things like, what is your backup and recovery system game plan?
Mhm.
What is it? For funds transfer, do you use MFA, multi-factor authentication? Oh, you don't? Well, you should. I know it's an extra step. Like when you're transferring funds, you have to, have somebody else sign off on it in your organization. Or when the money is sent, do you then pick up the phone and call the person and make sure that they received it so that it wasn't
Right.
intercepted? What does your email security posture look like? Are you doing your email updates? Speaking of updates, what security control measures do you have in place? What vendors are you using for your cybersecurity? Do you do anti-phishing training? Do you conduct fire drills where is somebody at your firm, particularly C-level, IT or CIO, will she send out fake phishing emails to see who gets caught up in it, and then have them do additional training? So before a lot of my clients meet me, they're probably 20% there. I've gotten many to about 65% there. And I tell it to them in a way, you never want to beat anybody over the head with stuff because then they won't listen to you. But I like to give examples
Yeah.
of situations that I know. So to answer your question again, I'm 110% there. My clients, I've gotten up to about 65%, just because their job is not to be cybersecurity experts. That's kind of my job. But my job is to make them more acutely aware of the risks that are out there.
So it seems like part of your job is to put numbers on risk, but part of
Yeah.
your job is to make people aware, teach them about
Teach-
the
That's
risk.
right. That's exactly right.
How about we end this with tips for a few different categories? So what would be one tip that you would want to give a company on cybersecurity?
The one tip I would give is that cybersecurity is no longer just an IT imperative. It is a business imperative. I want every company listening out there today to understand that their CIO or CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, they deserve a seat at the table along with the CEO, the CFO, the COO. No longer can you treat them like they live in a back office somewhere and, oh, my computer crashed, help, right? Or I don't remember my password. They are so instrumental, part of your business resiliency. That's what every company needs to understand and know. And then a step beyond that too, Sudhi, is that companies should understand that their boards, I know it's very clubby to have your friends on your board because they're going to get some money or potential equity in there, but at least one board seat must be reserved for someone who has significant cybersecurity experience, because that is equivalent now to somebody having a CFO, for example, having financial experience join a board. You need somebody on that board with cybersecurity experience, given that every company lives and dies by technology these days. You can't avoid it. You can't be in business if you were not technology savvy. Therefore, you do need somebody on your board. That's my big advice for businesses.
Absolutely. And the cyber warfare is bigger. That's the new Cold War era stuff happening. Everything's on the computer. No one's trying to physically attack.
Nobody. So the big attack, if you remember, and help me with the name of the company, it was who was the provider that got hit that affected 85,000 companies in the United States? It was not Kaseya, that was recent, but it was another one.
Okay. Name's not coming to mind.
Okay, it was a big MSP, but when they got hit, the problem is cyber's not tangible, so you don't like see it like you do like a war, but it was equivalent to a giant war happening.
Right.
And there's still a lot of these 85,000 companies. Several companies still don't know if latent virus may exist in their platform. So it was big, and I'll remember the name pretty soon. SolarWinds. SolarWinds.
Yeah.
Remember SolarWinds? Yeah, big.
What would be one tip for product designers, would you say, who are designing products like Internet of Things, connect your thermostat, connect your water filter to the internet?
Yeah. So for the product designers, you have to know going in that your product is going to be hacked. Right? You have to assume it will be. In fact, I'll go a step further and say, oh no, this will be hacked. So I think if you go in assuming it will be hacked, so know then that, okay, how can I make it as easy as possible for the user to understand ways to keep her or him safe? And it's such things like, and I know this sounds really corny what I'm going to say, but I would never give a product designer, oh, here's some technical advice you should do on making this more secure. You know they're going to do that.
Right.
What I'm talking about is when you're unwrapping that baby monitor or taking out the device that you're going to use to Alexa monitor your home.
Yeah.
It should say in big words, no different than you used to have smoking ads in the 80s and the 90s, Surgeon General warning. This product is susceptible to hacking and some words along the line of it may threaten it may threaten you from a financial standpoint, because at the end of the day, that's what a lot of thieves are looking for. Please make sure that you use encryption and password protection to the max on this. So when you get these devices, I wouldn't tell them change it from a technology standpoint, but I would say make sure that they understand in big letters, they meaning the consumer who bought your product. I need to make sure that when I hook this up to the internet, that my internet is really secure and I'm using, a VPN. Make sure that you communicate cyber high. It should be a standard, just like the smoking ads. You have to do it.
So you were talking about the label. When you were describing it earlier, I had a picture of a kill switch in my mind. I thought all of these devices should come with like a red kill switch. You flip it and all the electronics and connections are off. It's now a brick.
It's a bricking, that's right. Well, that could work too. But my thing is, I don't know when people would then know how to activate the kill switch, right? Because how do you know if your device is hacked or not? Many times you don't.
Oh.
And also there's, heck, there's happy people that would say, I think I'm being hacked. The lights are flickering on and off. So then they just hit the kill switch on all their stuff. So I think that may lead, I like the idea, but it may lead to more panic than it would. But and then also the old thing is, how do you know when something's been hacked? So, but that is funny though, like the red kill switch. I can see that happening.
When you were describing it, I was imagining all these products having a kill switch.
Kill switch.
And lastly, what would be one tip for normal people, you and I? What is one thing we can do in our regular lives about cybersecurity?
This is I was waiting for this. So right here I have you can see this. I know I'm going to need a filter here.
Yeah.
This is my external backup that I use. And I back up externally. I have 2 different external backups and I keep them in different parts. One is at the office and one is at my home. And I back up externally every 2 weeks and I do not keep the external backup plugged in. And I do that because everybody's going to get hacked. I assume everybody's going to get hacked on their cloud storage device, right? Whatever platform that you use, whether it's Box or whether it's the Google, what's the Google cloud service called again?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a Google cloud service. Yeah, whatever cloud service, personal cloud service you use, chances are you're going to get hacked. Yeah. So my thing is, I keep a backup. Everybody should do that. Do it frequently, once a week or once every other week. You have to be disciplined about it even if it's around your morning routine. Like, for example, some people, every Monday I go grocery shopping, every Friday I go, okay, before you go grocery shopping, plug in, backup, then forget about it. Do not leave it plugged in and set it on auto backup, because bad guys can easily infect your backup. Yeah. So that's my thing, is backup externally, like your life depended on it, and have 2 external backups, because one of those external backups is going to get destroyed probably, or eaten by your dog. It's going to happen. So if you think that way, then you know I need to have fail safes.
And that's what I'm doing this weekend then. I will go buy 2 external hard drives.
Two.
Les, thank you so much for talking with me today. It was an awesome dive into risks and what I believe, things we don't really think about very often.
Yep, that's right.
Thank you very much for talking with me.
Thank you, Sudhi.